Welcome back to the Custom Built and Screwed podcast, everybody. I'm Eric, your host, and we are going to dive into a couple different topics today. Number one, we are going to talk about renovation pitfalls, mistakes people commonly make, such as underestimating the budget, rushing the planning phase, hiring the cheapest contractor, prioritizing trends over function, neglecting lighting and electrical plans, attempting DIY beyond your skill level, skipping necessary permits, ignoring the structural bones of the house, relying on incorrect measurements, and buying materials too early or too late. We'll dive into those in a second here. We will also talk about my two favorite rants. One is stormwater management and the absolute shitstorm that is, and that creates for homeowners and people trying to do anything. And of course, we will finish off today's pod with a reminder of the boondoggle that is the North Shore wastewater treatment plant. No, I'm not letting it go. Let's dive in. All right. So, we're often asked by people when I'm out and about, what are some things to avoid when I'm renovating? And I would say the underestimating of the budget really is and should be at the top of the list. We have seen so many times where we meet with clients and they have a budget in mind that they think is reasonable for the work that they want to do. Whatever the case may be, it doesn't really matter what that number is. In that client's mind, they have X number of dollars in their mind is what that project is worth. And they could meet 3 or 4 or even 5 different contractors that tell them that actually that project is worth significantly more than what they have in mind. And so what I see homeowners do time and time again is they keep interviewing and keep meeting with contractors until they find somebody that tells them what they want to hear. And then they hire that person. And lo and behold, when, and shock and surprise when, you get midway through the project and come to realize that the budget for that project should have been, somewhere amongst the average of the first 3 numbers you got from the first 3 people that you met with that were honorable and good people. And so I think the fact of the matter is like, just because you want something to cost what you think it's worth, for example, like you have a home on, now I'm speaking to Vancouver, BC terms here, people, so don't jump down my throats for what your costs are where you live. I can speak fairly intelligently to what costs are in Vancouver. But you could have a typical home and you could have in your mind that 50 to 60,000 should be more than enough to do the kitchen renovation that you've been dreaming about. And then you meet with somebody like me and maybe 2 or 3 other reputable contractors, and they come in and say, nah, sorry, dude, that's going to be more like 125, 150. And then they continue to hunt for people that are going to tell them that $50,000 price point. And obviously, if you get 2 or 3 contractors that tell you that something is going to cost a certain amount, you probably want to take the average of that and assume that that is roughly what the cost is going to be, and maybe add 20 to 30% to that number to cover your butt and have some contingency there, right? So don't underestimate what the project cost is going to be, because that is the surefire way to start your project off on the wrong foot and have nothing but problems after the fact. It's a nightmare. The next thing that we see a lot of people do is rush through the planning phase. Listen, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And if you've never heard that saying before, well, you'll hopefully start hearing it a lot more now. The fact of the matter is if you do not have a well thought out, well-established plan, you are going to spend tens of thousands of dollars more renovating your home or building your home because you haven't had somebody think through all the details and really think through how everything is going to go together and work, right? You need to make sure that how much space you have for stairs and hallways and all of these sorts of things are being considered and calculated, right? The fact of the matter is if you try to rush through planning and get into construction without getting the planning work done. Make sure before you start, you have at least 80 to 90% of your selections made and completed, that you have floor plans locked down that you are in love with, and that, space planning has been thought about. Demand that your designer adds furniture into the different rooms so you can really get an appreciation for how much space is or is not in a particular room. For example, demand that, a 2-foot wide bedside table goes on either side of a queen size bed in every bedroom. Or maybe you have a king bed. Well, then maybe you're going to go with a 30-inch or a 36-inch wide bedside table and a king bed. See what that furniture looks like. Get it in the room. Get it in space. Get it spaced on there. And don't forget to take into consideration any sort of depth you might need for a headboard or a footboard on your bed frame, right? Like those things take up space too. Now, a pro tip from Eric is grab a piece of cardboard, well, maybe not cardboard, like craft paper or something like that, and cut a circle that scales to 3 feet. I do like one that's 2 feet and one that's 3 feet. And that would represent what a person looks like in that open space. And just move that circle around the drawing and make sure that you can move that circle where you need it to go and how you want it to go. And think about how the door is open and all those sorts of things, right? Really make sure that you are getting your plans dialed in and well thought out. Please don't rush into construction. It is a massive mistake lots of people make. Listen, I've done it too. I've learned my lessons over the years. I'm 20 years into this business now. These are mistakes that we don't make anymore. And, when we do have clients that are like, well, we want to get going before we have permits, or we want to get going before this. I mean, there's always ways to work within those limitations. But as a contractor, it's also my duty to be like, well, dude, if you want me to start before we have all of our I's dotted and T's crossed, you're going to need to release me from any accountability for budget overages, because we don't have a finalized plan yet. Like, we've got a rough idea of what the budget is going to be, but until we've made all the material selections and figured everything out, like, there's just no way that I can commit to any sort of budget. And of course, if I don't exactly know what the scope of work is going to be, how the heck are we supposed to figure out how long the project is going to take as well? So, having a really good set of drawings and plans and spending time on the details before you start construction is a really, really smart thing to do. Now, this next point goes, and it kind of ties into the first point on the budget side of things. But I mean, again, like, if you're out there and you're shopping for and trying to hire and plan on hiring the cheapest contractor, don't be disappointed when your project ends up looking like shit and you have a terrible experience. That's what's going to happen when you hire the cheapest person. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You get what you pay for, right? I mean, we talk about it lots on this channel and in our client meetings. There are 3 pillars to construction: time, speed, cost. You get to pick 2. If something is cheap and fast, it's not going to be good. If something is cheap and good, it's not going to be fast. And if something is good and cheap, it's not going to be. Am I getting it all confused in my head now? Anyways, you get where I'm going with that. You get to pick 2 of those options, right? So decide which 2 are important to you. For Sprucehill, we want to get our projects done in a timely manner, and we want to do a great job for our clients. So we don't focus as much on cost. Does that mean that I am totally on board with our project managers allowing budgets to go crazy and just hire the most expensive tile setter, electrician, plumber? Absolutely not. Our mandate, for Sprucehill anyways, is to find the best value for our clients humanly possible. And I talk about that a lot with my team. But again, time, cost, quality. You get to pick 2. Remember that. And when you pick the cheapest contractor, you are not going to get quality. Like, it is almost 100% unlikely to happen. Like, it's just, if you hire a cheap contractor, don't be sad and don't be disappointed when you move in and things look like crap and don't last very long. Like, that's, you get what you pay for, and it is what it is. And there's really nothing more that can be said about that, right? Nothing in life is free, and certainly nothing good in life is completely free. So get 3 quotes, maybe 4, possibly 5. Throw away the cheapest right away. Get rid of the cheapest. Don't even entertain it. The low quote needs to go in the bin. Throw it away. You may or may not want to consider the high quote, but certainly middle high, like, that's the person that you want to be working with if you want to have a job that's done well. If you're looking to flip your home, or you're looking to put lipstick on a pig or whatever else, again, like, then maybe you can hire that cheap contractor. But if you're doing work that you're hoping to live in and that you're hoping to grow into and raise your family in, or just be there yourself for years to come, pay for somebody good to do a great job for you, right? A good contractor is going to have a team of phenomenal trade partners that will be able to create amazing things for you. You do have to pay for it. Now, the next thing is this idea of prioritizing trends over function. And, you see, I mean, this is a problem as old as time. And, for me anyways, when it comes to designing our projects and doing work for our clients, function has to be on the same level as form, right? If something looks really pretty, but it's totally non-functional, like, what's the point? Unless you have nothing but money to spend and or want to live in a museum or a residence that doesn't work. I mean, it looks great, but it doesn't function. I mean, that's your prerogative, of course. But in my humble opinion, really balancing function and form is really, 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 really important. So watch for, going and doing trendy sort of stuff, right? Like, what's trending right now, modern farmhouse. What else is also trending? Like, these super contemporary, super modern homes and buildings and structures and whatnot. We'll see what happens, but my guess is that those are going to be a phase. Much like, the phase of having sunken living rooms or having little crickets kind of in your garage door opening. Like, these are all going to be things that in 40 years, people are going to look back and be like, oh, I know approximately when this home was built because of the style it is, right? Be careful. I mean, if you want to go that style, then go for it. But, there's a reason why, like, traditional homes work, and it's because they just are timeless. They always look good. I mean, maybe for some of you guys it's a little bit too detailed and a little bit too pretty or whatever, but timeless. You're not going to do yourself any disfavors by doing that at all. Now, the next thing that we should think about is lighting and electrical plans, right? A lot of residential projects don't end up with any sort of reflected ceiling plan. This is a really important something to have there, guys, right? Like, you need to know, and your contractor needs to know, like, where are we going to be putting pot lights? Where are we going to be putting pendants? Where are we going to be putting sconces? Where do we need to put plugs and switches for for beds and that sort of thing, right? You need to have a reflected ceiling plan. It is like basically the overall design for your electrician to know where they're going to put stuff. Not dissimilar to, your floor plan that denotes where your plumbing items are going to go, right? Your toilet rough-in has to go in a specific spot. Your shower rough-in is really specific. If you don't want it to look like crap, of course. So, you've got to have electrical and lighting plans. Again, educate yourself. There's so many ways to, learn about what is or isn't important, how close pot lights should or shouldn't be depending on the room that they're in. In our experience, we find that, for example, if you have 9-foot ceilings, even 8-foot to be honest, 4-inch pot lights should be no more than 4 feet apart in active areas like kitchen islands, that sort of thing, right? Now, you could go 5.5 feet apart when it's more of a passive area. So think like bedroom, rec room, those sorts of things. You don't need to have as many lights in order to light those spaces because it's passive lighting. It's not active lighting. In your kitchen, you really want to have a good idea of what's going on the counter, on the floor, all of those sorts of things. Now, here's a pro tip that you might not know. You don't want to put your lighting in your kitchen centered on the walking areas of the kitchen, because nobody gives a shit about where they're walking in the kitchen necessarily. What they care about is what's going on the counters. Are they clean? Is there other stuff going on there? Can I see my fingers so I don't cut them off when I'm dicing some onion or celery or whatever? So what you want to do is actually have your pot light basically kind of on the edge of your countertop. Like if you're in your kitchen, look at the edge of your countertop, look up directly above that. That's roughly where ideally you're going to find a pot light, which is roughly 2 feet, 25 inches off of the framed wall. Now, I know a lot of you guys are out there watching HGTV. That's hard to say. HGTV. Try saying that a bunch of times over and over again. Some of the stuff that tradespeople do is not as easy as it's made to look. Probably the guys that make, for example, drywalling look really easy, they've been doing it a really long time and they've got some mad skills. And drywalling is an exceptionally difficult task to do well. Same thing with tiling, right? Like you can absolutely go into a home and see somebody that was a butcher that tiled the room versus somebody who's a true professional and has tiled the room. So if you don't really know what you're doing, just maybe consider hiring somebody to do it. You don't necessarily, like I'm not here. Well, I mean, of course I am a little bit, but I'm not here saying thou must hire a GC. Like absolutely, fill your boots. You can absolutely do it. I mean, the advantage to hiring somebody like Sprucehill or an organization like Sprucehill is, frankly, the relationships that we have with all our trade partners, right? They will answer the phone when myself or my project managers call. They may or may not answer the phone for a new number that they've never seen before. So that's really the leverage that a GC has. And then, of course, we've already, most of us, I certainly have, made a lot of mistakes over the years that we've learned from. And those mistakes are what saves time and saves money. So hiring a GC, I would say, very, very conservatively will shave 50% off of the timeline for the project and at least, well, it'll probably like almost break even on cost unless you're really good and don't make any mistakes. But you're probably going to make a mistake because that's what happens when you don't do this stuff for a living. It's possible that you won't. It's possible. But I would say, hiring a GC is well worth it most of the time, unless you are a pretty savvy person and you really understand what's going on. And I know there's a lot of you out there and all the power to you. That's awesome to see the weekend warriors working on their homes and whatnot. I have no issue with that at all. I think that's fantastic. Nothing like a little bit of sweat equity. That said, if you're taking on a larger project, this is where that whole DIY going above and beyond, right? Like it's one thing to go and be like, oh, hey, I can renovate a bathroom, to renovating a kitchen, to renovating an entire floor of a home, right? They're 3 very different projects. Now, take those a step further. It was very different than renovating an entire home. Very, very different than doing an addition or a second story addition. Right? Like when you start doing these larger projects, having somebody in your corner that knows what the heck they're doing, I think it's necessary. I really do. I mean, obviously it's not. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're risking your hard-earned capital unnecessarily, in my humble opinion. Which leads me to skipping permits. I hate dealing currently. You know what? Let me preface this, because this is we'll jump back into this permit situation when I get into the stormwater management side of things. 2018, 2019, getting a permit was taxing, but it wasn't onerous. And at least in the Lower Mainland here, it felt for the most part somewhat collaborative, and everybody was kind of sort of trying to work together. And I'm not quite sure what happened from 2018, 2019 until now, other than obviously COVID. But holy smokes, getting a building permit has become insanely onerous and just a painful and expensive process. And I think that's something that municipalities really need to start reflecting on and think about when it comes to encouraging their citizens, to get building permits and to actually service their customers better, right? It should not take 6 months to get a building permit to build a garage and do a kitchen renovation. It's absurd, obscene even, right? It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. So nonetheless, though, while it might be super time consuming and expensive to get those building permits, if you don't get a building permit and you're doing work that requires building permits, you're really taking on a lot of risk. And I really don't think it makes sense. If you're spending tens of thousands of dollars, I don't think it really makes sense to risk not getting a building permit when you're supposed to get one. If you are supposed to get a building permit, cover your butt, right? It's not worth the headache or hassle of not doing so. So, if you're going to do work without a permit, obviously that's up to you. I personally don't necessarily think that that's a great way to go most of the time anyways. And certainly if you are doing any sort of structural change, your choice whether or not you get a permit. But I'm going to say not doing so can have some fairly significant ramifications. And I'll tell you what, if you get caught doing a bunch of work without permits, the municipality that you're dealing with is not going to take that very favorably, and with a strong sense of humor, shall we say. All right. So the next thing is, people are forever wanting to make their home look pretty on the inside. And that's fine. Where we run into problems are when we're doing things like that and we're failing to address and deal with any sort of structural or bones of the house sort of issues. And so what are bones of the house issues? Well, again, structural, are there rotten exterior walls? Are there load bearing points that are no longer properly supported for whatever reason? Copper pipe, right? We talk about this. We've got a couple shorts that there's been a good amount of dialogue and where we talk about the fact that you should be replacing copper pipes. Any home that's 30 years or older probably makes sense to change those copper pipes out to PEX or some sort of similar product so that you don't have to worry about the copper pinholing. Take care of what's behind the walls and inside of the walls. Yes, I get that you want to be able to show your friends your beautiful marble countertops or your Toto floating wall hung toilet. These are fantastic features. Don't get me wrong. They're absolutely beautiful. But they should not come at the sacrifice of making sure that the home is structurally sound. And when I say structurally sound, I am not limiting that to actual stand-up structural. I'm including, is it electrically sound? Is the plumbing working? Do you have a good roof? Right? What about your drain tile? What's the point in spending $400,000 redoing your basement and not addressing your drain tile that is all clogged up and has 20 feet of solid roots in a section of it? and then you've spent 400 grand on a new basement and it floods the next year. Not good. So, take care of the bones of the house and address those first. And if that means that you're going to have to skim and, make some sacrifices on the design, then make sacrifices. It's easy enough to add things in after the fact, especially cabinetry, right? Or if you have like accent tile or things like that, like those are easy enough things to do after the fact. But it's really difficult to replumb a house after you've moved in. Or add a new beam or a new post that's needed, right? So get the structure done first, and then if you have money left over, make it beautiful. Incorrect measurements. God, we've had nothing but issues with this ourselves. If you don't have the measurements right on your drawings, you are screwed. There is no eyeballing anything. There is measuring it, getting the measurements accurate and correct, or don't bother doing the work. Real simple. You cannot just guess what these things are or aren't going to be. You really have to be considerate about what measurements are, and also making sure that, your designer and or yourself, if you're doing it, are thinking about all of the finishes, right? Like if you want to have a 36-inch finished hallway, well, if there's just drywall on the walls, it needs to be framed to 37. If there's drywall and tile on the walls, well, then maybe it needs to be framed to 38 or even 38 and a half, depending on how thick the drywall is and the tile is. So, you really need to be thinking about all of those sorts of details. And that's, again, goes back to like having good plans, which also speaks to like, don't eyeball things. Get it right. Get your measurements done. Now, one thing that we do in our walkthroughs or prior to our client walkthroughs pre-installation is we have our project managers go through every room in the house and make sure that the rough-in locations for everything are exactly where they need to be, right? Depending on the appliance, like for example, a Wolf stove, there is like assuming when I'm wrong here, but like there's like a 5-inch by 5-inch square, right? Like the smallest little area where the gas outlet can come for that stove. 5 inches by 5 inches. And if the gas outlet isn't within that 5-inch by 5-inch square as a rough-in, you won't be able to push your stove all the way back to the wall. So, can you fix it after the fact? Sometimes, and usually you can, but then it's just more delays, more time. You've got your appliance installer on site. Like the most important thing when you're going through finish is making sure that everything is actually going to fit and work, so that when you have the people there to complete the work, they can come once, get it done, and move on. There's nothing that drags out the completion of a project by having to constantly cycle trades back through because you were missing a piece here, missing a piece there, whatever the case may be. So make sure you get your measurements right. The last thing that we'll talk about when it comes to renovation pitfalls is buying materials too early or too late. And I'm going to add a little bit to this and say not enough, right? So let's talk about too early. If you buy materials too early, what can happen, especially anything that comes with any sort of warranty? The warranty starts running the second you take delivery of that appliance or of that product. So if you buy a fridge today, but it's not going to get installed until next summer, well, you've just lost 6 months of your warranty on that fridge, unless you can get it in writing from the appliance showroom that they will extend your warranty by X number of days or months because it hasn't been put in use yet. Most of the time, they are not going to do that. You are going to start using your warranty time the second that appliance arrives on site. So be careful about ordering that stuff too early. The other thing that can happen is if you're ordering materials to site too early, the job site can get cluttered and clogged up with things that aren't needed and aren't necessary. And now people are having to work around all of that stuff, right? Like if you bring toilets to site 3 months before they need to be installed, well, that's just going to be in people's way. unless you have a specific place on the site where you can house or, store those items, if they're brought to site too early, they're just going to be in the way. And that is going to cost you time and money because people are going to have to work around it. And the other issue that can come up is those things can get damaged. Accidents happen. That's why they're accidents. They're not on purposes, they're accidents. So somebody drops a 2x4 or drops a tool onto a box or whatever the case may be, and it chips or damages whatever inside of the box. I mean, it's not a pleasant time for anybody. So be careful about ordering materials too early. Conversely, also make sure you're not ordering materials too late. It's really important to talk to your suppliers and trade partners and really get a clear understanding as to how much lead time different elements for your project are going to need to be ordered. And we bake those timeframes into the project plans that we create for our projects. Smartsheet all the way. If you're wondering what to use for project planning, Smartsheet. Free plug for Smartsheet. But if you order materials too late, then that's also going to delay your project because now you are going to be sitting there waiting for materials to come before you can start moving the project down the road. The other thing that can come up and can happen as well, and this is something even for you DIYers, is ordering the right amount of materials. Always order at least 1 or 2 extra pieces, or depending on what the product is, at least 10, in some cases 20 to 25% extra materials for wastage and breakage, right? Things happen and things are going to get damaged. Things are going to get broken. There's going to be cutoffs and just waste. That's part of the process. So you're much better off to have a little bit too much material on site than too little. And of course it's a balancing act. I don't want to hear about it in the comments, although feel free. But the fact of the matter is you don't want to have to send somebody back to the lumber yard to pick up one piece of baseboard, right? Like, for us as GCs providing these sorts of services to our clients, if my project managers don't order enough baseboard, and this is how I coach them, like if you order 16 pieces of baseboard, but we need 17, well, the cost of that 17th piece of baseboard isn't just the cost of the baseboard. It's now also the cost of the single trip getting to and from the lumber yard to bring that material to the project. And it doesn't really matter who's paying for it. If you're on a fixed price and the contractor's paying for it, well, that's a waste of your profit right there as a fixed price contractor. And if you're a time and materials contractor, well, that's a terrible way to deliver value to your clients by having unnecessary and wasteful trips to the lumber yard. So make sure you order slightly more than you think you're going to need. It is just going to save you a whole ton of headache and heartache in the future. The other thing that just came into mind as well is if you don't order enough material, die lots can change, and so can the profiles, right? People don't realize it, but when you're buying baseboard, for example, or crown moldings from the lumber yards, well, those products have to get passed through a machine to shape them, and those shapers are knives, metal knives that are going to have to get sharpened every now and then. Well, every time they get sharpened, the profile changes just ever so much, but it changes enough that it makes it really hard to get really good looking tight outside and inside corners on your crown molding and or your baseboard because the profile has changed slightly. So really, really important to do your best to get the same batch of crown, base, case, all those sorts of things. And when it comes to tile, flooring, getting the same die lot, right? Like there can be a lot of changes. So, just be wary of that and order the right amount of material. Obviously you don't want to order too much. And especially if the material isn't returnable, you really need to balance ordering enough and not ordering too much, because then you're going to look like a schmuck in front of your client. So materials, it's an art form. And again, as professional contractors, like these are things that we do all the time, and we have a decent amount of experience knowing, the different kinds of materials. For example, like if you're doing a herringbone pattern for your tile, you're going to require quite a bit more wastage than if you're just doing a stacked or staggered pattern. A lot more wastage because of the diagonals. You waste a lot of tile when you do herringbone, a lot. The installation for it's a lot more money too, by the way. Pro tip. Okay, so those are my top 10 renovation pitfalls for you. I hope they're helpful. I hope they're handy. If you have any questions or any other thoughts, add them in the comments below. Would love to hear from you. Now, let's touch base on my two favorite rant topics, which is stormwater management and the wastewater treatment plant of North Shore. So let's start with stormwater management. Again, I don't care where you live. If the local government is talking about putting stormwater management onto the property owner's plate of responsibilities, you need to bang pots and pans and get up and scream and say, no, the municipality needs to be responsible for stormwater management, not the citizen. What the hell else are we paying the goddamn property taxes for if they're not maintaining the infrastructure? We don't need any more people working in City Hall coming up with more ideas for red tape and rules and hoops for us to jump through. What we need are boots on the ground, upgrading our infrastructure underneath the streets. That's what we need. When you have these changes made to bylaws and the definition of words in the bylaws, the repercussions are just so tremendous, and nobody realizes how far-reaching and how impactful some of these changes can have. And again, like in the district of North Vancouver with this stupid-ass stormwater management bylaw that they changed the definitions for 2 years ago or something like that, depending on the project, you're looking at anywhere from a 10,000 water stormwater management system to, in some cases, people are putting in tanked basements. Like, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars of increased costs because the municipality can't get their shit together and organize things on their side of the street, right? Like, to me, what the hell else are we paying our property taxes for if not for our local governments and our local municipalities to take care of us and to take care of the infrastructure that supports our way of life? And that includes being able to construct and build things on our properties, right? If I want to put in a full basement, I should be able to do that. I own the land. If I want to dig a hole to China, I should be allowed to do that, right? There should be no restrictions or limitations on that. It's not doing anybody else any harm. Now, you're going to have some people maybe in the comments saying that, oh, well, the fish is it's artificially rushing groundwater to streams and that sort of thing. Good point. Good point. So why don't the municipalities put in their own detention systems that will control the flow of water into these streams? Why are we making our customers, right? Why are the homeowners, the customers, being forced to pay all of this money because the municipality can't take care of their own infrastructure? It's ridiculous. And of course, as I've said before, and I'll continue to say again, there's no way to control or force people to maintain their stupid ass detention tank systems or whatever else. And there's nothing stopping anybody from bypassing whatever they've installed after the fact, rendering whatever was installed mute, like it was never there. Right? Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, it's dumb. It's a dumb decision. It's a bad bylaw. It needs to be rescinded. It needs to be Control-Alt-Deleted, and we need to go back to how stormwater was dealt with from a bylaw perspective, whatever it was, 2 or 3 years ago now. It's dumb, at least in the district of North Vancouver. And I'm telling you, if you live someplace where there's even murmurings of stormwater management, you're in for a world of hurt. You need to fight tooth and nail. Do not let any of this sort of nonsense get approved where you live, because it is an absolute nightmare. It's a disaster. I'm living proof of it. I'm living in a home with no basement because I wasn't allowed to build a basement, even though the basement would have been above the drain pipe on the boulevard. So I would have been able to gravity drain the property, no sump pumps or anything like that. So no risk of flooding or needing to have backup generator, no basement. And that's been happening all over the North Shore over the last couple of years. The other thing is, people are going to tank basements. Let's see how long it takes for one of those suckers to spring a leak. I mean, it's just dumb, right? Find me a boat that hasn't sprung a leak. I think you're going to be looking a long time. You can't just build these things and think that they're never going to leak. Of course they're going to leak. And I'll tell you what, if you're doing a tank basement and your contractors convinced you to do a tank basement, talk to a civil engineer, talk to several civil engineers and see what they think about for tanking basements for living space. The ones that I've talked to don't recommend it. They don't think it's a good idea at all. Tanking is fine for parkades and things like that where people aren't living and there's not organics that are going to start to mold and have all sorts of issues. Tanking for living space, not probably a great idea. Not probably a great idea. All right, now let's finish off today's podcast with talking about this godforsaken wastewater treatment plant. Again, if you know somebody who's involved in this, if you know somebody that has the ability to affect somebody that's involved in this, the people of the North Shore need accountability. Some people need to lose their jobs. Going from a $700 million budget to $4 billion. Going from 700 million to 4 billion is first class, S tier, unbelievable incompetence. And people need to be held accountable. People need to lose their jobs. And that's what needs to happen. We need to start showing the people of this country and certainly of the North Shore that people, that their tax dollars are valued and that the people do care. And that if people make terrible choices, they're going to lose their jobs, right? Like having a government job doesn't mean, and it shouldn't mean at least, that you have a job for life. It means that you should have a job if you're really good at what you do. And if you suck, you should get fired because that's the real world. That's my take. That's what I think. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye now.